All right, well, we'll get started. Thanks for coming out tonight to Planning Commission. We will have Commissioner Mendenhall lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please say the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. We will go ahead and get started with our agenda tonight. And the first is a preliminary plat by Quick Quack Highway 6 Spanish Fork Parkway preliminary plat.
I'll recuse myself from this one.
Okay, Commissioner Ernst is going to recuse himself.
Can we have him sit in the hot seat?
I'm sure he would love to.
All right. You ready? We've got a presentation slide, if you don't mind pulling that up, Mike. For the first two items, I just want to clarify. The applicants did provide a lot more information than you generally would see on a preliminary plat. Both of them are looking to move forward at a quick pace, and so they have provided quite a bit of information that would normally be seen on the final plat or the site plan. So just a reminder for the next two items, you are the land use authority. These are standard preliminary plat requests, and so the action tonight would be final as far as these items go. The first one's pretty straightforward. It's a property just to the east of Holiday Oil off of Spanish Fork Parkway and north of Highway 6. Right there on the map.
Just to the west.
To the west.
Oh, to the west, sorry. I need my visuals. The applicant's looking for 3 lots. It's a 3-lot commercial subdivision that's being proposed. The DRC did look at it this morning. I have updated the conditions that were that are included in the staff report before you. This is the staff report here. Do you have the, awesome. So some of the things that the DRC dove into or details, in my opinion, that were associated with the site plan. Quick Quack is looking to build on the south property. I believe it's parcel 1. And so that's why we've got quite a bit of their design material as far as their site would be improved in the future. This is pending a future final plat and site plan approval, and so we do anticipate there might be some refinement to that. But tonight we do have a slide that kind of shows the generic outline. This is it right here. So this is the location. You can see Holiday Oil here to the east. We're looking at the property that's to the east of the existing city. There's lost all power on this one.
Take one.
So to the east of the substation. Next slide, please. This shows the layout of the lots, and so you'd have this south lot that's adjacent to the railroad tracks is the one that the applicant behind me here is here to speak to tonight, as well as the overall subdivision. The property is owned by Holiday Oil, and so it is something that we would anticipate their involvement on. Next slide, please. This kind of shows the layout of the lots. This would be a final plat, and so when it is approved and taken to the county for recording purposes, this is the document that would be used. Usually we don't see that at this point in the subdivision process, but this is helpful in some regards. You've got the north lot, this smaller third lot, and then you've got lot 2, I believe it is at the bottom. Next slide, please. And then I just added this one not because we're acting or giving any feedback to the future site plan, but I like this image because it shows the potential Roundabout configuration, which is still being finalized with city staff, shows the proposed use that Quick Quack is looking to move forward on to the south. There is this piece that would be the third lot, kind of a smaller lot. And then this is really rough conceptual design work just to kind of show how the site might fill out. What's important here is that with the preliminary plat, we're trying to identify exactly where appropriate access points would be and spacing and things of that nature. And so if you look at the conditions, we've got some that are specific to that as far as the applicant continuing to coordinate with our public works and engineering department specifically. Any questions on the conditions or this item tonight?
Can you point to the access point?
We've got one here that's proposed, which would be a right in, right out. If you recall, the last time the Planning Commission discussed this, there was the call for the median, which is shown. And then you would have a leg off of the roundabout itself, right here.
And then the diagonal, the cross hatches there? that
This is
shows-
cross-access easements, and so shared access between the lots.
So there's a good flow coming in and out and around with enough room for queuing that wouldn't get in the way of the other lots.
That is our hope. That's what we're trying to coordinate now with the applicant. And so he knows the use and the demand for his property, but at the same time, we want to, if we go back one slide, Mike, at the same time, we want to kind of look into the future needs of these other two lots.
Do we have any idea what is potentially looking at lot 3 and lot 1?
Not definitively. I believe are you aware if they're under contract to be purchased yet?
No, I just know there's a lot of interest.
Yeah, I believe the applicant was unsuccessful in trying to purchase that one as well, but
The property that's behind the power station, this little sliver that's back here,
yeah.
does the city own that, or what's the plans with that property?
Let's jump to the interactive map if you don't mind, Mike.
That piece?
So it is owned by the city, and in the DRC meeting this morning, there was some discussion with the power department as far as maintaining access to this facility. Currently, there's 2 gates that both front Spanish Fork Parkway. There is some discussion as far as adding a potential future gate here, in hopes that maybe this, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, in hopes that the north access would be eliminated. So then if they needed to, they could drive in here, and then if they couldn't turn around in the yard, they would have the ability to come out and turn around back here and come.
And the city's
back
access
through.
easement is on the plat.
Yeah, currently we have one up here, but there is some talks to do away with that. And so that's condition number 6.
Right there, top, that's per Tom Cooper, is that your question?
Yeah, so currently we have this one here as well as this one here. But we're not too thrilled about the idea of there being a drive access here. So if we can consolidate it to here and then have a turnaround here, that might work better.
So the city would more likely maintain that property behind?
Yeah.
Could you bring that interactive map back? So I'm not sure I heard the answer to the question about who owns these.
So the city owns this.
And this right here is part of our map.
This is the property that's being considered right now.
Shauna's question about enough room for queuing of the cars as they come into the car wash. We're kind of used to seeing quite a few cars in the Quick Quack on the north end of town, that the only place that they have is on the street once that queuing area is filled. This looks like it's got much more ability to stack cars in there and queue them up. That was the intention with the, you see that, you know, as they come in here, you know, that's quite a bit of area.
And if I remember right, yeah, it comes the other way. Yeah.
Are they coming in this way then? That's even better.
Oh, that's,
Joseph Ernest, on behalf of the applicant.
Do you know how many cars that this can hold? Do you remember? I know you talked about it in the first one.
It's a lot. I don't know the exact number, but you guys actually beat up the site plan in a public hearing not too long ago. This is just to turn this piece of land into 3 lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a ton of stacking, more than we'd need. And actually on the north side, part of the remodel was moving the access further away from the intersection. So, which was good. It was a good thing.
Good.
So I have a question for staff. Sorry, applicant. One of the conditions is that the applicant addresses the traffic study recommendations with the engineering in regard to access to the site.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of concerns about, I mean, just a couple meetings ago, about the wait times during busy times here. Has that been addressed? What has been the discussions around that?
I believe that's one of the items that is related to the traffic study as far as,
Exactly.
we'll let Mike speak to that.
There's a couple items on that list that I just sent back to the civil, or Joe's civil to say, can you address how your site may be able to be adjusted to address the concerns of the traffic engineer. I was just trying to get back from them.
Right now, we have, right here, like, it's 2 lanes, is it 2 lanes up in here? And then
It's 1 lane.
1 lane?
Single lane,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Will that be expanding to allow more access into the intersection with this development?
The roundabout, is it 2 lanes or a single
No,
lane?
it's a single lane roundabout. Can't remember, it's hard to remember on the aerial versus this, but there'll be a median down the middle here, so there'll not be as many turning.
Which is great, yeah.
As far as this goes, I think it takes a little bit on this side, but not a lot, as far as additional asphalt. So you wouldn't have like double car stacking back here.
One of the conversations during the first meeting was the fact that to add, potentially, to add a right turn lane when, if and when the railroad goes away, and also when if UDOT, because it's a UDOT intersection. Am I remembering that right?
We would petition to UDOT, and then it also involved the railroad as well.
Right.
So this crossing here where they have the concrete over with the rails, they'd have to be approving to widen that as well. So it becomes a bigger.
But if it goes away in the next couple of years, which is,
Way, then yeah, it'd be just between us and UDOT, and they look at stacking and say, yeah, do we move it or not?
Gotcha.
The issue that would come up to then is obviously there's not a huge landscaping buffer, but there's a little bit to play with here. That probably
Enough for a lane.
So it's a smaller roundabout than the one that's across Highway 6.
Right.
And the traffic study has shown that that is adequate?
Yeah, there's a lot more cars between Canyon and Highway 6 than here.
Even considering the potential for the growth of the neighborhoods in that?
So they run a 2050 model,
Okay.
which it basically says everything has something developed on it based on the city's current plan. So 14,000 cars, I think, is the number on Central Parkway, and the other one's like 20 something on the south side. Which you wouldn't think it'd be that different because they're right next to each other, but it's quite a difference.
any other questions or discussions?
Also, traffic.
Oh, yeah.
real quick.
Thanks, Mike.
Give me a second, but I can do that.
No, they're tense.
Hurts my eyes.
So the recommendations, for some time, so the idea is to have the roundabout constructed with this project. They would add a median on the south lake. We would extend the railroad tracks, that they address that. Right in, right out access on the parkway, should be 200 feet south of the parkway roundabout, proceed standard outside the road roundabout. That's the one we're having to look at, right now it's right here, not 200 feet, so that's something we're having them look at, and then both using the same idea, how far away is access from the roundabout. So those are the three recommendations, and there's 75 pages of other stuff, so those are the main things they.
So how much further down would that be? Just,
So what, so they can build something else here and here?
Here, this is one.
Okay.
Roundabout,
Okay, thanks.
so roundabout stays there.
At the time of that study, it also showed a full motion access, which means right in, right out, left in. Since we're doing a median now, so it's changed it. That's why Mike's having A-Trans Engineering supply an entirely new traffic report specific to that.
Makes sense.
So the concerns, right, you have a guy coming around the roundabout, hopefully 15 miles an hour, probably more like 30, depending on who's driving it. With this person making a right, be able to make a decision, looking back this way, with someone coming through. So that's the concept anyway.
My thought is, I just think if that's going to be truly become a thoroughfare to connect that part of this, to connect from the 2550 side through Spanish Fork Parkway, it just seems like it would make sense to have the same size roundabout going through the other side, but that's just my opinion. And it seems like it would help the stacking. It would help to widen that area, especially if, given one of our other items tonight, if there possibly is going to be more commercial on the other side if we change the general plan on that. I don't know if we have any influence or recommendation or if anybody else thinks that, but it seems like if it's going to become a main thoroughfare, that ought to be a bigger roundabout in that area, but that's just my opinion.
Worried that it becomes a choke point later on that it's hard to fix.
Right, yes. And if there's neighbors already thinking it's a choke point now.
yeah. So do we have any further discussion points on this, or? Because we're talking about the preliminary plat. Obviously, there is a condition right now working with staff on the traffic, but I think that is definitely something to take into consideration. But is there anybody who would like to make a motion if there is no discussion items?
Can I speak to that as action?
Yeah.
So as an applicant, when I hear the city engineer say that this is actually planned for a 2050 traffic capacity, and then I hear very well-meaning commissioner say that she may just disagree, I would want, as an applicant who would have to pay for this, some sort of reasoning from the government of Spanish Fork beyond, I just disagree with the city engineer. So just for what it's worth. It seems more than adequate for what it is, and the city engineer agrees. So I would hope you would consider that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's why I said it was my opinion. I'm not sure that it was educated, but intuitively, that's what it seems like to me.
The next steps, Brandon, if this plat is approved, all these findings have to be satisfied. Finding number 4 would have to be established that it still meets with the projected growth for the area before it would move forward.
Yes,
And it would still have to go through all the other approval processes.
correct.
And condition number 4 states clearly that the applicant will address these issues as they come, once that everything has been decided on the traffic engineering and everything else. So, right now, that is what the city is required. So, to go above and beyond that, there would have to be good reasoning for that. And I don't know if we have that at this time, but you've got to also understand that at some time, I think the only thing that may affect that is is what goes in on the northeast side of this intersection. If it's a major commercial development, that could cause some issues because that kind of traffic would concentrate in the area of that intersection, where homes are going to be dispersed, and there are roads that can get rid of the traffic east and, to the east and to the north. And we've got a couple of good roads that go east and west there. So I can see why the traffic study, if it hasn't taken into consideration that there may be a commercial component there, that would have to be vetted as well. Because we are planning this, and we don't want to, stick a sword in the ground there and have it come back to bite us later. So I understand that. But again, there'll have to be, like the applicant has said, it'd have to be a good reason for that. And right now, we don't have that good reason, I assume.
And Michael, when you're saying it assumes everything's built out to its potential, it would be built out according to what general plan
General
says
plan
the time?
state. So if a more intense use comes, that's the idea of a traffic study per site. So if you had a 10-story
You
apartment
have to have a
complex.
mic for that guy.
Is that better? Okay. If you had a 10-story apartment complex or an amusement park or something that's very different, then obviously a traffic study would say, hey, you got to adjust all these things to have the same net impact that the general plan did when we created the master plan itself.
And that developer
That would be on the other
would
applicant.
also be responsible
For those impacts, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? Anything further? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that the Quick Quack Highway 6 Parkway plat approval be approved based on staff's finding and conditions.
I second that motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussions on that motion? Okay, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. All right. Brandon, I think it's you again.
Thank you. We're going to jump to the other side of the city now. Commissioner Ernst, I'd be more than happy to return this if you'd
You can keep
like
it.
Okay. This is the property that was owned for a while by Jerry Hill, and then it was subsequently sold to the Smith brothers. You may recall it was a site that was looked at potentially for a meat processing facility, and then since that time, they decided to sell the property. We do have the applicants here tonight, if you have any questions for them. Very similar to the first item on your agenda, this is a preliminary plat, so it's the early start of the subdivision process, but the applicant has provided a lot more detail than we generally would require with a preliminary plat. And so we don't necessarily need to dive into any of the details, but if there's things that are on your mind, feel free to share those. So we're looking at this property here tonight. This is zoned industrially, and the applicant is looking to do a 6-lot subdivision. Let's jump to the next slide. This kind of shows how it would lay out. With this proposal, the applicant would be constructing a new east-west connecting road through here. If we jump to the next slide, and one more. This kind of would show how that would provide some additional access points in the future for, this is ultimately their build-out proposal at this time. If we go back one slide, Mike. Ultimately, what we're looking at tonight is the rough layout of the proposed subdivision lots. One of note that was discussed with the DRC this morning is this proposed lot 6 here. It is a result of existing property lines and then ultimately the layout of this road. And so the idea that as it comes through for final plat, there may be some notations on the plat as far as restrictions for the use until that is combined with some additional property in the future. I think the applicant said that the current design might slate for that to be temporary detention basin for storm drain. But the idea is that in the future, as these properties potentially could redevelop, they'd have some frontage here, and then some of these parcels could be combined at that time. pretty straightforward request. The only condition that was added based on this morning's meeting with the DRC was condition number 3. And what that refers to is the applicant, in order to have this property function for development purposes, they will be doing some extensions of utilities and storm drain off-site. And previously to their development proposal, others in the area have done some similar work and have filed what are called connectors agreements or pioneering agreements, so that when they come in and develop and they're piggybacking off of some of the work that was put in, then there's a reimbursement that kicks in. And so that's the third condition. Any questions for staff or the applicant at this time?
Is this part of the applicant's property or is it not?
This is not. So I don't have the full plan set in here, but they do anticipate and have a call out for a masonry screening wall, here, as well as here. This home is outside of it. Currently, I believe there's 4 homes that are located within the subdivision. I believe the 4th one's over here. But with their revisions, we do have a demolition and phasing plan as far as removal, and then a phasing plan has been provided for the subdivision, kind of showing the takedown and the timing of the improvements. Great question. Well, we appreciate the applicant being here tonight as well, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Any questions?
Are there any tenants that are pending for these lots? You'd like to come up?
Joseph Powell, representing the applicant. Currently, we don't have any existing tenants in place. These would be speculation buildings that we're working on, and we are marketing right now and looking for tenants.
And so the ground that is there now, it's agricultural, and they'll continue to farm it until you're ready to move on the development of it, or are you planning on developing it soon?
We're planning on developing it soon, and I believe it's mainly pasture ground.
Yes.
And we'll, once we get approvals through the city, then we'll start construction as soon as possible.
You own it now?
Yes, we just closed on it.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any discussion on this before we move to a potential motion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the El Tenedor Logistics Center preliminary plat, including the staff, subject to the staff's finding and conditions.
Got a motion?
I'll second it.
We got a second. Any talks on that motion? Okay, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes. Title 15 amendments.
Let's go to the next slide, Mike. We do have the applicant here tonight. Oh, they were, oh, there they are. They joined us this morning for the DRC meeting as well. Usually we don't try and schedule those on the same day, but with the holidays, it was a little interesting. So the property owner, the applicant, owns what's we define as an irregularly shaped lot. And so basically, the way we define that is anytime you have your rear property line, which is generally not parallel to your front property line. So, if it's a rectangular square lot, that would not qualify. Probably the easiest scenario to think through is a lot on a cul-de-sac. And so you have a curved street frontage, and then you might have some weird angles in the back. And Title 15 currently has this section of code that deals with how to calculate just the rear setback. And so on a standard lot, your rear setback is generally 25. If you're a corner lot, that can go down to 20. Or if you're master plan development, you can request a rear lot of 20 as well. So for instance, later on the agenda, we've got the Arrowhead subdivision. That's one of their requests. And usually we look and see, okay, what kind of housing product can go and fit on those lots as part of the master plan development. But in this case, the applicant's looking to do an addition onto the home. Our building official worked with them, and I believe I provided you his, or the applicant provided his email correspondence to them as far as his calculation, as well as the applicant's proposal at amending the city code. The DRC did discuss it this morning and felt instead of making connection to Highway 6 and I-15, they felt it would be more important just to make the change applicable to irregular shaped lots citywide. The building official was asked how often this setback calculation comes up as an issue, and he said it was only a handful of times each year. Most of the lots don't fall into this category, or they don't have the issue as far as the room on the back of the property. And so what's not changing is the last sentence, which is no portion, the last part of the sentence, which is no portion can be closer than 15, but what is proposed to be changed is the average. Currently it's set at 25, so in essence, to get that average, you've got portions of the structure that are more than 25 feet back, which is our standard setback. And so by dropping it to 20, they felt that was a reasonable accommodation on behalf of the city. Any questions on this proposal?
How often does John Little, I assume it's John,
Yes, our building official.
run into this statute and then grant a variance anyway when it's an irregular lot? Pretty routinely, or does the variance have to go to planning
John
commission?
doesn't have the ability to grant a variance.
So how often are they granted? And do they have to then get kicked out into planning commission?
Two in the last 16 years,
Yeah.
neither of them had to do anything like this.
Yeah.
This, we
Go
come
ahead.
across irregular lots, John said today, I think.
A handful of times a year. And it's not necessarily an issue every time, it's just a review and a calculation of making sure that the setback, the rear setback is met.
Thanks.
Great
So
question.
why do we want to change Title 15 then, instead of having them each be reviewed as individual cases and treat them as individuals for a variance?
So the burden for variance is established by, or the criteria to obtain a variance is established by state code, and the hurdles are high in order to be able to grant that variance. And so staff in the past administration of this code, and in considering the request from the applicant, and then considering future lot configurations moving forward, felt this was a very reasonable approach to take. When you look at the average and how we're still not allowing a structure, the structure's already allowed to be within 15 feet for a portion of it, but then we have the expectation that the other end goes well beyond the 25 foot. And so by dropping the average, we felt that might be more useful for the applicant as far as placing an addition or a home on the property.
I know you said at the beginning, but on a regular lot, the setback is 20 feet or 25 feet?
So on a standard lot,
Yeah.
it's 25. On a corner lot, it's 20. But then a master plan development,
Allows
there
for some
is the
variance.
potential for negotiations as far as setbacks based on housing product. And recently, we have been getting a lot of requests for the 20 feet.
When they, just out of curiosity, when they're seeing requests for changes, is it for, this is case it's an addition?
Yes.
Is it for a new build or is it for additions mostly?
In our discussions with John, I would think it would be additions.
Yeah.
But
No, it's both.
It makes
I've
sense for
seen
additions.
Both, and again, this does not come up, come up often. But we certainly have seen both. I'm just gonna speak to why I'm really comfortable with this and the approach of having language in the code that applies citywide versus maybe something that's a little bit more case by case. To that point, it's just simply ease of administration, really, in order for us to operate a little bit more efficiently. be a little bit more responsive and that type of a thing. For that reason, I like this. And as Brandon said, the idea that under certain circumstances with master plan developments, people can have basically this setback approved anyway. And that has been much more the norm than the exception in the past many years, with the idea that, generally speaking, we like the idea of homeowners ultimately having the opportunity to put as much house on a property as they'd like. And reducing that rear setback helps, whether it's a pop-out kitchen or it's just the rear plane of the home or whatever it might be. So I really don't feel that this is a significant deviation from what is pretty common today, just maybe to speak at it from that perspective.
I think another thing to mention is that this only applies to irregular lots.
Right.
So that also limits what can be done. In other words, someone can't come in with a regular shaped lot and expect the same kind of give and take on the average.
Right. And really, that's just where the 15 feet comes into play, which this rule, as that stands now, it predates me, so it might go back 20 plus years. And, the idea being that if you've got a 100-foot long rear lot line and a small portion of a home comes to within 15 feet of that rear lot line, but yet then the vast majority of the yard space and the distance from a rear lot line is maybe considerably more than 15 feet. It's worked pretty well for people to be able to make use of, oftentimes it's lots in cul-de-sacs, where this becomes an issue where it does get tight on one corner, but then they have all of the additional space on maybe a pie-shaped kind of a lot or something like that they can use as a backyard, and there's that much more distance between them and any neighbors that are behind and that type of a thing.
What's the average rear setback requirement for a lot that is not irregular?
Typically, it's 25 feet, like Brandon said, that's the norm. But again, you're aware that many of the projects that have been presented for approval have been master plan developments, which is really simply just an approval tool that the city has that affords some potential flexibility on things like setbacks. And in a lot of those cases, it's been 20 feet. We haven't, that I can recall, and maybe Brandon will remember some situations different, we have not approved anything at a distance that's less than 20 feet that I can remember, but.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant want to speak before the public hearing, after?
That was great.
Okay, perfect. Okay, with that, we're gonna go, Brandon has something he wants to say.
To add, they've been great to work with. They did give permission to kind of let staff promote this proposal instead of what they had originally drafted. And so we appreciate them working with us on that.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna head into, we have some public hearings coming up. Just want to give the caveat with the public hearings, we want to limit it to 3 minutes, and then also if we have a lot of the same things being said, try to limit that to make sure that we're not just saying the same thing over and over. So with that, we'll head into a public hearing. Is anybody here to talk about this item? Seeing none, we'll go out of public hearing. Do you have any questions for staff or the applicant or any discussion items?
I'm ready to make a motion, Chairman.
All right, then I will entertain a motion.
I move the Planning Commission recommends approval of the Title 15 amendments as presented.
Okay, got a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Okay, number 6, general plan amendment, Hallam property.
Thank you, Mr. Carden. I'm going to take a quick look from a citywide perspective for a moment before we dive into the specific request that's before you. I want to talk a little bit about what the general plan is and the perspective that we typically take as staff when we're looking at commerce. The different colors that we have on this particular map coincide with different descriptions of land uses that we have. And part of those descriptions that we have of land uses are zoning districts that are identified that, in the way that we use this, are consistent with, for example, this yellow color that we see here. That is our medium density residential designation. And there are a handful of different zoning districts that the narrative part of this document, the general plan, would say work in that particular color. Our R16 residential zone, R18, R19, different things like that. And I'll use that description by way of mentioning that in many cases with these different colors, there are a variety of different maybe development types or land uses that are allowed within those colors, or at least different types of development. That might be single-family homes on 6,000 square foot lots, or single-family homes on 9,000 square foot lots, or it could be single-family homes, but also townhomes, which would maybe be the case in areas that have, for example, this orange color here. We don't have nearly as many of those on the map. And then we have designations on the map that exclusively allow for certain types of activities. And there aren't quite as many of those, but these red colors that we see throughout the city, those expressly identify sites that are set aside or otherwise identified on the map as being potentially good sites for commerce. Commercial, is what that red color connotates. That's its title as a designation on the map of our general plan. That's what that is. And it's further described in the narrative of the city's general plan. Lots of different things can happen in a community anywhere. Particularly in today's market, you can build a home just about any place and it's marketable. People will move in, people will buy it, people will live there. Obviously, some sites are more conducive to creating good neighborhoods and a good residential environment than others might be. But that particular land use today, really can work, at least work in the marketplace from or in a lot of different locations. Sometimes there are uses that require very specific types of services. Let's say that it's a particular industrial type of use that might need access to rail. We have a certain part of the community that's been identified as maybe being conducive to that type of a thing because we have rail facilities that could serve some of those sites. Other things like municipal facilities where typically you'll have a wastewater treatment plant and a well-planned community that's at the lowest possible elevation in a community because gravity matters with respect to how that works. So there are different things that certainly require specific geography or maybe specific facilities in order to work. And commerce is one of those things. We know that oftentimes traffic and access and visibility and land uses that surround particular sites are really, really important components to being able to have a Walmart, for example, or a McDonald's, or any one of many different types of commercial uses. Probably a list that is impossible to exhaust, but that being the case, again, I would say that well-planned communities put some effort into identifying where those sites are. You can't create another junction of what really is a multi-state type of transportation facility like US 6 and what unquestionably is an interstate at I-15. That junction is only going to happen there. Those facilities can't be moved to someplace else. And therefore, whatever uses make sense to place around there, or rather what uses can work because of that, they're limited to that area. And that is, at least in part, why this map has the designations that we have around that really, really significant junction. And that's why the uses that are there today flourish. It's the fact that those facilities exist, combined with the idea that there are a lot of people in a certain vicinity of that make commerce work there. So from that perspective, periodically, because commerce matters a lot to cities, it certainly matters a lot to Spanish Fork, and we've been very fortunate in recent years to have seen the amount of commercial activity that happens in Spanish Fork grow. At least from a revenue perspective, that's been a very healthy thing for the city. And particularly with that in mind, given the idea that we probably will collect 4+ times as much revenue through sales tax this year as we will in property tax. That's how a lot of services get paid for. Simply put, police, fire, recreation, lots of different services are funded through sales tax revenue. And I don't think that's likely to change anytime soon. So back to the point I was making a second ago, we put some effort into trying to identify locations that can support those, retail uses, both ones that exist today and ones that might be in demand in the future. So again, to step back to where I was a second ago, periodically we will look at this map and try to identify places where it makes sense to plan for that type of use. Just a few years ago, now to kind of progress into the proposal that's before you tonight, we had a proposal to change the general plan, same area as what we'll talk about in a second, right here, from what existed then to commercial. And out of that conversation and a few others that we had, we hired a consultant, a very reputable commercial retail firm with a research arm, to help us better understand what sites we have in the community that might be able to support retail development. So thinking proactively about not only where, but trying to maybe understand how much land it might make sense to plan for retail development. We went through that exercise with them, which in fact came out of conversations that we had with the Planning Commission about the proposal that was here to study how much retail development, maybe an area like what I'm identifying here, just the northeast bench, what that ultimately could support when the area is built out. Probably not just looking at that area, but also growth in Mapleton, and probably to the east of us as well in Carbon County and that type of a thing. And we also did the same thing out along the Arrowhead and 8000 South corridors. And in short, as we looked in this particular area here, clearly the consultant that we worked with felt that there would be a need for retail services in that area. The conclusions as to how much land to plan for were pretty foggy, though, I guess I would say. They really didn't give us any explicit direction in terms of the quantity of land that maybe we should plan for or set aside for commercial development. And in light of that, we really didn't make any changes to what was planned for in the area. In fact, one of the specific things that was contemplated then was the impact that development on the south side of US Highway 6 would have. Those conversations were all had before the neighborhood Walmart was approved, certainly before that was built. And we talked about that being kind of a test case, just to see exactly what the demand would be, how quickly, maybe certain sales benchmarks would be reached with commerce on the south side of 6 and that type of a thing. That's really where we left it at the time. That being said, the applicants that have presented this request approached the city here just a few months ago, kind of to resuscitate that concept. And the initial proposal that we had, as I understand it, was to take a portion of their property. So now, Mike, maybe if we can just go back to the slides. A portion of their property, which is on the corner of 700 South and Spanish Fork Parkway, this area right here, and to change the zoning of that property, whether it would be maybe a full 20 acres, going maybe in this direction or that direction, or something less, to commercial. Now, you understand well, but I'll describe it for anybody here that might not understand what zoning means relative to the general plan. With right now, this area on the general plan being designated for low-density residential development, I didn't really feel like it was appropriate to jump straight into commercial zoning. So in short, the request that's before tonight is the result of us talking through the merit of maybe taking one step towards setting aside some land for potentially some future commercial development in the area, with the idea that zoning would follow at some future date. Oftentimes, a proposed zone change follows when an actual end user is committed and ready to go. Personally, I think that's the best approach to take for lots of different reasons, and I'll touch on those in just a couple of minutes. But back to the proposal that's before you tonight, which ultimately might change our general plan map from what we have today, which is an intersection with mixed-use designations on two legs of it and low-density residential development on another, particular very low-density type of development, to having commercial on the northeast corner. By design, this is intended to be a broad brush projection as to what makes sense and what should be planned for. So with this particular proposal here, we're suggesting that we don't know if ultimately having 15 acres of non-residential development on that corner is the best fit. Incidentally, 15 acres probably would be a pretty good sized grocer and some out parcels and maybe a little bit of strip retail space, something like that. I don't know if that makes the most sense, or if it might be two different anchors that might need 25 acres, or something even much smaller than that. Maybe just 5 or 6 acres on the corner, and maybe an office building, some strip retail space, and a couple of pads or that type of a thing. And the idea of the description that, as proposed, this change would afford is to really let that vet itself. And as the area evolves, as traffic patterns change, as growth occurs, and as the demand in the marketplace might grow for what we're talking about, non-residential uses on that corner, as the property owner starts to field maybe proposals to purchase property and that type of a thing, then with a specific zoning change, those specific boundaries really get nailed down. And again, that happens when we go from this step here, which is really just a blueprint, to actually building a development and identifying boundaries and actual sizes and that sort of a thing. Does that make sense relative to where we are in the process and what we're hoping to accomplish with this particular change here? I mean, so that being said, we've had a couple of different conversations with the applicant recently about this. Got to go back years to the last time this came before the Planning Commission. This is a different proposal than what came before Commission years ago. The proposal before was quite a bit more aggressive, thinking maybe along the lines of 40 acres of commercial development, which incidentally, to use Canyon Creek as a guide, I think if we lumped everything in Canyon Creek into one box, it would fit in about 80 acres. That being it, again, a very, very prominent intersection, super high traffic counts, national tenants that will only have one presence probably in South Utah County ever, at Costco, for example, and that type of a thing. Certainly the demand, without having a crystal ball and being able to speak in specifics, we don't know exactly what the demand might be out here, but we certainly know that it's going to be less than what we have at Canyon Creek. So planning for something, that might be along the lines of 15 or 20 acres in this vicinity, given that there is already 10 or so acres of non-residential development on the other side of Highway 6 to the south. I think that is the city looking out for an opportunity and adequately preserving space for that opportunity. I don't think we're necessarily over or undershooting if we're thinking in those terms of area. So supporting this particular change Not knowing if the next time this gets discussed is in 5 years, 10 or 20. Really, it's something that the market would dictate. Again, with that understanding, it's easy to support. I think that was the Development Review Committee's perspective when they made a recommendation to approve this just a few weeks ago. And I'll just add this. Recently, we've had conversations with retailers that are really struggling to find sites in Spanish Fork. We're out of space. If we had another 30 acres of flat farmland around US 6 and I-15, it would be under development very quickly, but it's not there. You have people undertaking some pretty expensive endeavors like the renovation of the Kmart building, for example, which is indicative of just the lengths that people are willing to go to and the amount of money people are willing to pay to be the owners of the Kmart building. They are investing tremendously in that building. We're out of room.
Still no announcement?
So looking out in this direction, it's been expressly discussed with retailers, as has land out around the Salem-Benjamin interchange. But this is where growth is happening. So if brokers come to Spanish Fork to look at sites, when they drive around this area, they see activity. They see construction, they see rooftops going up, they see cars driving up and down US 6 and Spanish Fork Parkway, and I am being told that those are things that they like. So I don't mean to go overboard or anything, but I do want to try to convey the idea that we take these types of proposals very seriously. Back to the idea that we try to be proactive, I think this is probably an area where if we could go back to 2011, when we last overhauled our general plan, we would have been well served to have contemplated more commercial area designation on the map back then. And it was just probably short-sightedness on our part that we didn't do that. So I think this, in all likelihood, could be a good correction for the city to take. And in that regard, I appreciate the applicant, like I said, kind of resuscitating the proposal that they made several years ago. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Do you want to talk to the difference between the blue and the red, like what can go in those?
Certainly. The red, the title's commercial, and that says a lot. It is exclusively a commercial designation that would allow for most retail uses that you can think of, as well as professional office uses, lots of personal service uses, restaurants, food users, what you see around US 6 and I-15, for example, just that kind of mixture of land uses, but not residential uses. That's really the big difference between the red and the blue, is the blue is mixed use designation. And that, in addition to allowing for lots of different types of commerce, professional office, retail, food, and so forth, car washes, it also would allow for certain types of residential development, typically not single-family homes, typically a little bit more intense development than that, townhomes. It's kind of been the sweet spot in our market for the past several years.
What is the acreage of this parcel that, I mean, if you were to cut off this, what's the acreage of the Walmart neighborhood Walmart parcel across the road? Is it comparable to this?
Let's take a minute, maybe while we're covering other things, Mike will help us zero in on that. I wanted to say that Canyon Gate, which is the little development next to Walmart and the neighborhood Walmart altogether, was about 10, but I might be off there.
Canyon Gate's where those restaurants are?
Like Del Taco and Marco's and things like that, yeah.
Whatever's going next to it.
I guess I'd want that to be included in that. So Canyon Gate and the neighborhood Walmart.
Just that area. I think that's the best.
It seems like if it works on this side and it's a comparable size on this side, knowing the impact and benefit it is on this side of the road.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
Be much bigger than that.
Well, Mike's looking at it. Does the city have any concerns with, you can see, I don't know if we can go back to the general plan map, but typically you can kind of get an idea here. We have commercial, and then a buffer zone. It doesn't look like we have the option for that with the way this is laying out. Is there any other ways that we could maneuver that to give some, a buffer between a commercial development and a residential here?
Short answer is sure. That's something you could make a recommendation on. And that'd be for the city council to decide, both in terms of what the general plan should call for and what ultimately the zoning would be. I will say this, and Commissioner Ernest and I had a chance to talk about this earlier today. And I can think of sites in Utah County and some in Salt Lake County that I think are good examples of how sometimes we talk about buffers as being more of a necessity than a luxury. From my perspective, the idea of putting an intense residential use next to a commercial use makes a ton of sense by way of having land uses that can kind of benefit from a synergistic kind of a relationship. The idea that we'll have almost 200 homes here within really easy walking distance of everything that's there, and otherwise just eliminating the need for those folks to get in cars and at least drive longer distances in the community to get a gallon of milk or to go buy a pizza or taco or anything like that. That's healthy and that's good planning. And I think that concept applies across the board any place. I really do. But I don't necessarily think that dwellings need a lot of protection from a contemporary grocery store, for example. That if a site's designed well, you can back 15,000 square foot lots right up to the backside of a grocery store, and nobody is worse off because of it. Talking about things like adequate landscape buffers, things that we already require, walls, certain types of lighting, and maybe it's ways that mechanical equipment on the non-residential side's addressed and that type of a thing. It certainly works very, very well in certain places. So the concept of having that transition from an intense land use like what we have here at the neighborhood Walmart to something else, I think it makes a ton of sense. I don't think it's necessary. And the only caution, I guess, that I feel from conversations that we've had about, well, there are a couple of things. One caution is the idea that we have worked to try to preserve space for lower density development. And I think it's really up for you to decide, how maybe that fits in with this particular proposal and whether there's a need for another residential component, maybe adjacent to some non-residential use in the area. A concept, again, that I think universally works any place. And I'm sensitive to concerns that get raised when we start talking about high density residential development, or at least higher than what is in the area right now, density residential development. But I think, Commissioner Mitchell, you bring up a good point that's certainly worth talking about.
A follow-up question to that. Can you explain at what point in the process the city would have the legal means to provide conditions to a commercial development that would, for instance, you have to put up a masonry wall, you need 10 mature trees 15 feet apart along the back border, and you need a 50-foot landscape buffer? Because that's one of the ways I can think through how this would work potentially could work really well, that you would have 15,000 square foot lots abutting a commercial zone, but only if the commercial area is self-contained and mitigate the effects against the residential. And so back to my original question is, at what point does the city have the legal means to apply conditions such as that for a permitted use even in a commercial zone?
Yeah.
Can I add to that before you do?
Yeah, please.
And the difference between, say, a Quick Quack or a grocery store, like abutting that residential neighborhood.
So Todd's question is kind of on mine. Can the conditions be use specific?
Right.
Yeah.
Also, I think that
We'll pile them on.
You better get a pen.
Oh, go ahead, you do
No,
that.
no, you go, no, please. Yours might dovetail in perfectly. so.
Well, and I was asking Commissioner Ernest on the side if neighbors would prefer to have, the neighbors that are there, neighbors that are building estate density residential, what would they prefer? Would they prefer to have commercial and then high-density residential and then their estate density residential? Or would they rather have commercial and then their low-density residential? And I have an opinion on that.
And yours is easy for me to answer. I mean, it's subjective, right?
Right,
Some might prefer one, they might prefer the other.
right.
I think it's easy to say that neither of them have to have more impact on a neighbor than the other one.
Right.
They could both be pretty benign for a neighbor.
You haven't got out of me and Todd's question yet.
Okay,
Just getting warmed up.
I was just saying to your point, this is the Target and Wiggy Wash, so in a quick quack and a brochure, if you want to say the two. And a Wiggy and quick quack are very different, right, Joseph?
What's that?
Anyway, but look, these are, you know, this is probably their half-acre lot, and then they have a wall that goes around them. This one, they have a 25, 30-foot buffer between the sidewalk and the wall, where this one, their back fence is the employee parking lot. So I think this is what you were
Yeah,
kind of getting at.
this is,
Good example.
this, I mean, if you go to Street View here, you'll get an immediate sense for what, some of the homes in the neighborhood are like. It's an upscale part of the community. Yeah, particularly as you go just a little bit further down the way, and, their backyard is that.
It does make sense that a road would go around it as well, actually, and that is a good buffer in and of itself.
yeah.
Could be. And I'm not trying to sell a particular concept or anything.
Right, but I'm just seeing that now as an idea as well.
That's a great example, Mike. I appreciate.
I think it also depends on the neighborhood that you're in and what is around it. Where the proposed change is now, that has been designated so far as the low-density housing. And so if you added more ground around that as high-density housing, that'd take a larger part of that out. And I'm pretty sensitive towards leaving as much low-density housing as we can
I'm with you.
in the area, because that is one thing that Spanish Fork has a fair amount of, but there's surrounding areas to Spanish Fork that aren't having any problem at all filling up their high-density or their low-density housing areas. And so
I wasn't advocating for that. I was asking if the staff had any concerns with having the commercial up against that.
Right. And I think we see that right here, that you could put the low density right up to the commercial and not have a highly disruptive problem, if it's designed well and fenced well and the landscaping is well thought out. I don't think that every commercial place needs to be surrounded by high density as the buffer. The buffer can be something else.
Yeah.
And obviously, this is a great example of that. And so I don't know that that's the question tonight. The question is how much do we want to include, if any, how many acres do we want to include in this commercial zone? Or this proposed commercial designation? And I think we need to be realistic about that. And I think that what you were talking about is perfectly, it was a good explanation. We don't want to cut it down to where it's smaller than what it needs to be, but at the same time, there's no reason to make it half the size of what we have down in North Park now. So
Yeah.
That's my comment.
Was your question answered?
Not even close. No. So I'll come at it from this perspective. Once a property is zoned commercial, we have regulations that come into play that do require, so let's say that it's a car wash or a Walmart. Our requirements for what a developer does if those uses are next to residential uses are identical. 6-foot masonry wall, 10 feet of landscaping, trees 30 feet on center, and that's what our ordinance requires. And there's some other things as well that come into play, but we're blind as to what type of commercial use it is. If it's in a zone and it's a permitted use, then if an applicant meets the requirements that we have in our code, it gets approved. It is not questionable. That is why we generally don't zone properties for development until we have an actual development proposal in front of us to review. Because as we go through that zone change process, the city council absolutely has latitude to take whatever things into consideration that are important to them to say, well, we know our code typically is 10 feet by way of a minimum amount of landscaping, but we don't think it's enough in this case. We feel like it needs to be 20, and maybe it needs to be bermed, and maybe the trees need to be 15 feet apart instead of 30, and that type of a thing. That's one reason why you'll hear us most of the time suggest that you not recommend that zoning be approved until you have an actual development plan to review. And I've got to mention that historically, commercial development has been the exception for us as the city. I've advocated to change the zoning to commercial 2 in many locations around the city, feeling like there wasn't necessarily a downside to doing that. And recently, I think we've seen our first instance of where that probably wasn't the best thing to do. And that'll be something that we discuss with you guys here in the next few months. So I think more than ever, I feel like that's the right approach to take. Changing the general plan sends a signal in the marketplace. It lets potential developers understand what the city's intentions are. I think that gives them a reason to make an investment and to prepare a plan that gets presented to staff and you and the city council with a zone change, and to have assurance that if it makes sense, there's a reasonably good chance that it gets approved. So process-wise, that's, I guess, how I would answer your question. I don't know if I hit on what you were hoping for there, but
You said the right answer.
thank you.
Pass.
Any other questions before we go into a public hearing?
I don't know if the applicant has anything to mention. I know he's here. We appreciate him being with us.
I had asked
but-
about the acreage.
Yeah, I think we probably have.
Walmart 6, the whole thing's 13. With all the Marcos Pizza and Walmart gas station.
And what's proposed, how many acres
What-
is that?
Yeah, of the
20?
proposed area.
20?
The idea
Yeah.
there is that it's between 15 and 25. That's kind of what we're trying to convey.
That's why it's a
Yeah, rough line.
amoeba shape.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So bigger than the Walmart area.
Potentially, I would say that there's this here as well that we could add,
And some other stuff too.
which this will be office space. At least that's what the property owner's telling us now. So this might be more like 16 acres on the south side. It's all said and done, but thanks.
Okay. Would the applicant like to come up now?
And it's just a general guideline.
I'm J. Merrill Hallam, representing Carol Hallam. So our property is in this, and Dave has pretty much given you a historical perspective of what we brought in 6 years ago. And a lot of what we talked about 6 years ago has taken place. I don't know if you can move that screen over that way so that we get, that's good. So this is the property in question right here. Here's where Spanish Fork city limits end right here. There's 500 doors going in here. There's another, I think 150 going in here. Richmond America has a contract on this, another 100 and something in here. This is the girls' home here. This is John Stewart's property that he plans to farm till he's dead, right, John? Amen. Okay, thank you. These are 3-acre lots here. Anyway, this is filled in since we were here before. This is now under construction. This is on the plot plan since we were in before. Walmart has come in, these businesses have come in, Holiday Oil came in 2 years ago. So when we came in 6 years ago, the idea was is there's no commercial up here available for all of this growth, and so it forces everything down to the freeway, which is a nightmare down there. The other thing, if you'll notice, the railroad right here is the line between Spanish Fork and Mapleton. There's, I believe, 2,500 proposed homes that are going up through this area right here in Mapleton. This piece of property right, I got to get my bearings.
Right there.
Where is the Maverick? Is that it right? Or is that it?
There it is.
Right there. Okay, so this property, I believe, is owned by Ridley for a grocery store, but they don't have a lot of commercial down here to serve all of this, and so this is either going to be going to Spanish Fork for service, or they're going to drive clear down into Springville, and my guess is they're going to come the shortest distance over into here. And it was mentioned earlier, the city makes a lot more money on sales tax than they do on property tax, and so for the convenience of citizens here, sales tax for the city, we think this would be a good solution to some of those issues there with that. We don't have a tenant. We don't have someone that's wanting to move right in and do something there, but we feel like now's the time to get that designated in the master plan as commercial. Also, if you'll notice here, this is commercial, and so is this down in here, and my guess this will eventually all fill in with commercial too, as need dictates from all of this coming this direction as well. So this is all platted for homes in here. The school district owns a property right in here for an elementary school, and then from this over to here is Salisbury. That's all been platted there. All of this has been platted, and all of this has been platted, and I know Ivory has been in on that piece of property there. So it's all filling in with residential homes, and so it leaves this on the outskirts for some kind of commercial service development there. So other than that, I think all the other issues have been covered. I know when this came up 6 years ago, there was concerns in the neighborhood of people stopping, issues with homeless people, transients, that type of thing. I've been the water master up there for 40 years. I'm up there for 6 months of the year, 24/7, and I have not seen any of that play out in that Walmart area up there. I think they've kept it clean. I think they've kept it policed. I see very little police activity up in that area up there. So that's all I have, so thank you.
Jay Merrill, I
Thank
have
you.
a question for you before you leave. Just, this is the property that we're talking about. Is 20 acres to that line, or does it come clear over to this?
No, there's two. When we came in originally, we had this and all of this at Olson's,
All right.
and then this of the cities here. So what we did is we basically drew a line like that, assuming there would be some buffer of whatever types around here. So there's a transition to that, and after seeing those pictures tonight, you know, it doesn't have to be high-rise, high-density stuff to be that kind of buffer in there.
Looks like,
Wow.
but this is Hallam property here, right?
Right, yeah, there's
Clear to here?
yeah, there's 20 acres here,
Okay,
and then 20 in there.
okay.
Take it out to
Thanks.
20. Mike's exercise right here is actually really interesting to me. Let's see how big 20 is. Okay.
About
So it's
28.
a lot bigger than the red bubble on the
Yeah.
exhibit.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions before going to a public hearing or comments? Joseph, you look like you want to say something.
Oh, I'm waiting for Mike to show 20 off the corner. I'm hoping you'll do that.
Oh, I thought he did.
He hasn't yet.
Exactly, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if we can get a better, yeah, like a,
That's what the proposal,
that's what the exhibit shows, but that's only like 11. Or no, that's pretty big,
Well, I
14
feel
and a half.
much more comfortable with 15 than 20.
Go ahead.
I forgot one thing.
Okay.
And
Get
I actually
20.
had this thought,
Get 20.
kind of, I can't remember who was speaking at the time, but general plan, right? We try to look at that holistically. We don't like looking at individual properties. We try to always look at a bigger picture. This situation in my mind is a little bit different. We've received a proposal from one property owner, and I think there's some merit in considering that on its own. Certainly, I think there's some value in maybe looking at the mixed use areas as well as, you know, maybe some additional property in this area here. We do anticipate going through some kind of general plan update this next 12 months or so, and that might be an appropriate time to look at that bigger picture, just to throw that out.
I was going to ask you when the staff came back up, is there a reason, like Jim Merrill was saying, that originally Olson's had theirs, and is there a reason why we weren't considering that now?
Just that they're not a part of the application is mine.
Part, and I appreciate that, Dave, because part of the reason they drew that line the way it was, and, sorry.
Thank you.
Olson and us brought it in before, and I'm gonna say that they'd be amenable to that, but we kind of went this way, assuming that then would butt this right here, and then that would be a natural transition into here. They have no intention of doing anything with this right now, but that would push the commercial over tight against here instead of out in here somewhere. So, you know, maybe in the master plan, you do look at that. That's why we kind of came, this is kind of how we came
And I agree that it would come
on
out.
that drawing right there, just the concept of it. And my thinking was then that would border this of Olson's, and there wouldn't be an issue with this down the road of them being commercial also. I think we got not only what we've got in Spanish Fork, we've got the Mapleton component, but we've also got the price component that comes down here too a lot. San Pete County as well. And that's the first catch is gonna be right there.
You think UDOT would give an additional access off of Highway 6 on the east side of that thing?
Or give us a right turn on 2550. Okay, we're gonna go into public hearing. And again, state your name when you come up, and we'll try to stick that to 3 minutes. Go into public hearing.
Hi, my name is Rachel Jacobson. I live in the Edge community just right on 2500. So my backyard faces 2550, that road right there. My concern with a lot of this, as you could guess, is all the traffic coming, because you have so much traffic coming for people to go to Walmart or those businesses over there. And so they come right down through there. I'm wondering if there's other ways we can create diversion of traffic. So like when he brought up commercial, like, I don't even know how to use, oh, here we go. Like to bring it kind of more this way, but you said there's no way to make any further roads into this at all.
UDOT would have to approve it, but.
Because I'm like, that would be nice because then you could break it up. Because right now, with just the way the road is, I think, is it just going to be a 3-lane, the median and the single both-way lanes. Yeah, and I'm like, that is just not gonna cut it with all the future growth in there. Like, turning left out of, off Rio Grande, out of my neighborhood, sometimes I wait like 5 minutes just to turn left from all the traffic that's coming off Highway 6, and that's coming like from the school direction, people going to get their groceries after school. And so I'm just wondering if there's some other options to help with that. I like the idea that that you can have a visual buffer around commercial to make it, you know, whether that's a wall or trees or whatever, so it's not so abrupt coming into residential areas. I don't know if like you would, like something like that that just adds more green. I think that's nice. I don't know if there's any workings for a park over in this area, but that would be one way to make people really happy, is like at a park over there or something next to the recreational. Because I think some commercial could be really nice, like if it's, you know, like dentist offices or physical therapists or whatever, like they can look really nice. But then there's some commercial you think like big, huge stores that I'm like, okay, that could be really big. But yeah, if there's buffers around it, you could make it look nice. But my main concern is the traffic, and especially since you can't turn right away going onto Highway 6, because the lane is, a lot of people will stay in it to go straight to Walmart. If there's any way to make a separate like lane that just can go directly onto the freeway, that would be awesome and help with a lot of the traffic in that area. But
A right turn lane?
yes, a right turn lane. Because before that was changed, it was awesome. But now you always get someone who's just going to sit there to go to the Walmart, and then then it just gets backed up, and it can get backed up pretty far. So I think those are my main thoughts. So
Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, we will go out of public hearing. Mike, do you want to talk about traffic, and then does someone want to take the idea of a park?
Have you thought about a roundabout there? Oh, you're making us do that.
Thanks, quick quack.
Might put a duck in the middle of it. Yeah, so the traffic consultant said a 3-lane road with shoulders big enough for right turn lanes. So in each direction, you could have a right and a left, and then through, handle the traffic again to the 2050 model. Obviously, if there's a commercial plant here, we'd have them look at it again and say, all right, well, if we change this to commercial, does the roadway handle what is the increase in that ADT, the traffic demands?
What kind of street is this one supposed to be at this point?
County
It'd
road.
be, well, right now it's a county road, but
Right.
eventually it'd be widened. We talked about the elementary school, the front of that road as well. Be a little bigger road. It'd have the ability to have a 3rd lane, so it'd be like Delmonte is.
Gotcha.
I think that's a good point, that road now is not a very large road, but it's got plenty of room to move both ways. And then once you tee into this road, it has the ability to go back into the highway here.
That's
and
going
then
away,
back
though.
down to Highway 6 the other way. That's not used a ton right now because it is a county road and it's been having a lot of work done recently, but that will become more of an it won't be an arterial road, but it'll be a better road than what it is now.
This road's going away, though, right? I mean, this railroad crossing is going away?
That's the idea, yes.
Eventually.
Really?
Yeah.
Which road crossing?
The one right there.
It's not our idea.
I like that crossing.
Mike, does the traffic engineer know about the potential school? Because that will have 2 heavy traffic times a day. Will also add to that load at that intersection.
So that,
Maybe not.
That's what I was gonna say.
I mean, that's.
Well,
We
yeah,
hope not,
yeah,
actually.
right. It probably won't just from that area.
It might come up into here.
So like the city.
Traffic can go north
I
and.
mean, parents still drop the kids off to school, so
Right.
we're not pretending there isn't any traffic. Like, this is where my kids go and there's no buses. It's, everyone walks. I would assume this area would be that way. I'm not sure with the tracks. But there should be enough houses there to generate for the school. Not buses.
I know when we were talking about the property behind the bombs, we talked a lot about the R115 zoning and not having enough of it, or theoretically not having enough of it. Does it worry us to take, like, if something like this was to come up and take up part of that, like, what does the climate or the cities feel on that? Dave, do you?
I think that's for the commission to decide.
Okay.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought he was going to say.
Yeah, really.
Of course it was.
Commerce is a big deal, speaking just like maybe as a representative of the organization as the city. You know, the idea that there are bills that have to be paid, and it certainly goes beyond that. And in fact, I'll mention this: Canyon Creek, Costco, getting them here in Spanish Fork, having seen that idea come along and it go from nothing to what it has been. As city staff, it was all about the numbers work, you know, relative to what it took to get Costco to come to Spanish Fork, and you know what in turn that's meant for the city financially. We were very focused on that, and I think that was very ignorant on our part, because we totally neglected the idea that the community would like to have those services a lot closer than Orem here in Spanish Fork. So there is a quality of life aspect as well of having services in closer proximity to your home. That is a big deal, and that's why if we look at the general plan, we've made an effort to identify places where more neighborhood-oriented types of services can be provided. So certainly that's something that's easy to support.
And then one other, before you sit down, the one other comment you made is that the entire general plan may be looked at here in the future. What does that look like time frame wise? What are, like, are we being hasty by making that change, this change now, when there might be a bigger general plan conversation here in the next couple of months?
Yeah, in all likelihood, if we start on schedule, which would be towards the end of the year, then we're probably into this time next year before we have a solid draft for people to start to talk about. So in that respect, I wouldn't necessarily feel that there's a need to put a proposal like this on hold for that long. The things that are really going to drive our timing going forward, assuming that the city council adopts the budget as proposed next month, there's a certain amount of funding that they've provided to help us get some outside help to go through a general plan update process. We're hoping to get some additional funding from UDOT and maybe some other folks as well, so that not only are we doing an update, but a very thorough, well-vetted update that really focuses a lot on public engagement. And the UDOT funds, as I understand it, probably don't become available until like late fall. So that's why, you know, I would guess that early start date would be end of the year.
I have a clarifying question about the current traffic study. So the inputs don't include this commercial zone, correct? Because that's not part of the general plan.
Right.
Okay, and so if this was approved, would you put those inputs into the model and see what the new outputs are for that roundabout and that street?
Typically we'd like to see what is coming, what is going to be, I mean, you can put in some general numbers, but I mean, we're talking 13,000 average day trips, kind of thing on this road. So taking 30 houses, and changing it to 6 car washes versus some dentist offices.
What if
So
it was
there's
a
some contrasting
grocery
things.
store? Oh, so, but you'll put these new inputs into the model and assess what the
Yeah.
traffic study is?
I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it would have a big enough effect that we would go and change our whole roadway system for something like this. If you were saying we want to create a Canyon Creek here or something that's vastly, vastly different, then it might be like, yeah, we definitely need to run it because this needs to be 2 additional lanes. But as you can see, well, anyway,
So 20 acres of commercial zoning you don't think would significantly impact the current traffic study output?
Probably not. I mean, the lanes of traffic, so going from a minor collector to a collector, each of those are like 4,000 to 6,000 trips a day increments. So if we're going to change 1,000 here or there, it's probably not going to tip and make this need to be a main street, 2 lanes in each way kind of a thing.
Okay.
But it is something we can go through with them and say, hey, how close are we to our next threshold?
Right,
If
okay.
we bump it up 10%, are we over that limit now? So yeah, those are good questions we can ask
Okay,
them.
thank you.
I think that part of what we are asked to do as the planning commission is to not only react to what is here today, but we need to plan for what is possible in the future. And I think that it has to be realistic. And I think that 20 acres is on that verge of probably as high as you would want to go for what is planned there and what is possible on the south side of Highway 6. But I'm comfortable with that. I think that that's large enough to house just about anything that would be proposed there, yet not so big to be burdensome on that side. I think if there is something that is extraordinary that we don't see there now, like Dave was saying, that a big box store that comes in only one in an area would locate there. Maybe it would, but if it would, it may be able to also necessitate, at that time, maybe the railroad track's gone and maybe Highway 6 would consider another road coming out onto Highway 6. We don't know that. We can't see that, but we can see that with the number of houses and the number of families and the number of people who use Highway 6, I think that there is a need for a little more commercial, and I think it's a good idea to have it on this intersection because there's not another one that will support this. And so I like the area, and I think that the acreage is pretty close to what it would support. Maybe a little less, but I don't think that there is anything that says it has to be. If we say 20 acres, what the applicant is asking for, if there's not a market for the 20 acres, then they can come back and ask to have it changed. We're not being asked to do anything with the zone right now. It's to change the general plan. So I'm comfortable with what the applicant has asked for.
Well, and after Mike drew those lines, it looks like it's more like 15 acres, which kind of matches but I guess it would turn into 20 acres if it kept going down.
And I don't know that that's so important, like I said.
Right, but that shape right there, I'm comfortable with that size.
To piggyback on that, as far as what I'd like to see there in the future, I would like to see commercial there. I think it makes sense there, but only if it's done in a way, and then to follow up on that, I think I'd like to see estate density abutting it, but I'd like the commercial done in such a way that it can coexist with estate density residential next to it. So when these zone changes come through with a use and a site plan, I'd like the city to be very thoughtful about the ways in which they can mitigate the two uses, so that both citizens, the commercial citizens and the residential citizens, can live together in peace.
Yeah.
And do well. That's what I'd like to see.
I really appreciated the example at the Orem Target and the larger estate-style homes in the back. That was a great example. Thank you.
Yeah, because it kind of goes to Rachel's comment about not being able to come out of this street here, right? If commercial was to put a street or something there to connect or a buffer, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but something like that could be helpful.
Also, to Rachel's comment, when the roundabout goes in there, part of your comment was you can't turn left out because there's a constant flow of cars going north. The roundabout should break up some of that traffic to give that left turn out, make that left turn out easier.
That's for sure happening.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. No, I'm kidding. It's okay.
Quick Cat's really excited about it.
And I would make one more comment, and that is that I am a proponent of the lower density, and so if this is done correctly, after seeing what was shown us tonight over in Orem, I would highly recommend that in the future, we allow that lower density to go right up to the edge of the commercial and do it in the right way, that it can be just as appealable as anywhere else.
Yeah, don't eat up any more of that land.
As much appeal.
Did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, Joseph summed up my feelings pretty well.
And I think that just one comment that I had is I think that we do need to probably discuss this piece of land if we are, if we're putting more commercial here, does that make sense here? Does the mixed use make sense at that point? Is it better that it's commercial? Is it smaller? Like, those conversations need to be had in the near future
I assumed what we were talking about was this and that with the new, the whole area.
This would be one area where the map really needs to be.
I agree.
Rachel, earlier today, I don't know who owns this piece of land, but I was like, well, let's just make that into a park then. But I don't own that land, so I can't say what happens with it. But
Go fund me for a park.
right.
Okay, any other comments, concerns? Okay, then I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we recommend to the city council that the Hallam General Plan amendment, I will make the motion or move that that go forward with the recommendations and findings of the city staff.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, next, zone change and preliminary plat for Arrowhead subdivision.
Once again, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is Main Street here. This is Arrowhead Trail going out to the Salem-Benjamin interchange out here. This is a property that Sunrock has had an industrial operation located on for decades. And the particular part of that property that's identified in yellow right here, that is the part that's the subject of the zone change. Right now, the subject property is zoned commercial 2, which is, yeah, let's go ahead and go. I think we've got, yeah. So right now, this part of the bigger property is zoned commercial 2. The remaining part is zoned R112. Just to get this out of the way, staff fully supports this change to add commercial square footage, commercial area to that corner. There are lots of things about this particular area that I think could be problematic in terms of actually getting something functional to fit there. Otherwise, the zoning of the property is proposed to remain the same. What's proposed is a master plan development in the R112 zone, and it meets the city's criteria for master plan developments in that particular zoning district. I'm going to be really brief because most of you have seen a few different iterations over the past few years of proposals for this property. Like I said, this one doesn't require a zone change. Previous ones would have required another residential zone. I think the applicants responded to comments that you've given, and what is now proposed in that regard is really easy for staff to support. We don't have concerns with the layout or design. The applicant's engineer made one last tweak just in the last week or two to the layout. Personally, I think that as designed, just the system of streets and things like that, it will do a lot to disperse traffic throughout the local street so that hopefully very few of them become preferred routes that get a majority of the traffic entering or leaving the development. We have relatively short lengths of residential streets before there's some kind of interruption, or in a few cases, some traffic calming measures to slow people down. It's good design. The conditions that we have listed in the staff report. They're fairly routine, but for the note on what I'm being told would be called an environmental oversight plan, which has to do with a proposal that the applicant has made. They have an environmental consultant that has given the city a proposal as to what steps will be taken as the properties develop to identify and remediate any remnants of the previous use that are a problem for its adaptation to a residential use. We have our own consultant that the city retains that is now reviewing the plan that the applicant's consultant has given us, kind of a peer review. And I'm certain that whether that plan needs to be modified, updated, changed, corrected in any way, at the end of the day, the path that we're on will have this property redeveloped in such a way that no residents that ultimately would live there should have any concerns, no neighbors should, and the city shouldn't, as the authority that is approving the development. So that all being said, fully support the proposal to change the zoning and the proposal to approve the master plan development.
Have we already approved the preliminary plat?
We did a few years ago, actually twice, yeah, once 15 years ago maybe, and once 4 or so years ago, yeah.
Oh, that's clever. That was good.
For real?
Well done, Dave.
It's been, yeah, I mean, it's been through a few different significant iterations.
Is the only significant change the change in the area of the commercial property then?
The applicant is now proposing to fully develop the site, whereas some of the things that we'd seen in the past had a certain area set aside. We talked about that being, maybe for a city park, maybe some other kind of use.
Wasn't there a drop off or something there?
There is off-site, but it's along that edge, which is why I love this. So if the applicants can reclaim that area, these are very desirable lots. But it's a great area to have more housing on.
And then this one right here, what is it? Just a large lot, or is it
Yeah.
supposed to be something else?
If you don't mind, I'll let the applicant speak to that, take their part of it.
Okay.
Okay, would the applicant like to come up?
Landlocked, too.
You should just give him an office.
No.
Yeah, true. Thank you. My name is Jared Morgan. I'm with GWC Capital. We're a Clyde company, sister company to Sunrock. We are the developer of the site, and I can speak to the question. Was it you, Commissioner Mendenhall, that asked that question? Yeah, that parcel. There's. Can you actually go back up to the site plan? There's 193, maybe 192 total lots on this site plan. And 8 of those lots are being incorporated into this plat. However, they are a part of the property of Mr. Scott Peterson. So Scott's home is here. So yeah, he's going to be retaining these 8 lots, and had one. That's the 24,000 square foot lot there. So
Good.
Is there access to it? I'm not seeing access to it.
From his side.
To the west, it's an existing road to the west.
Okay, so there is. Okay.
You can kind of see it there.
I'm trying to, oh, Quail Run? Oh, got it.
the homeowners, well, Scott's here if you'd like to ask him more questions about his property, but I did send over a slide deck to you that I just wanted to just give a brief history of what's occurred since we last met with you. I believe it was in April, because we received some great feedback in April, and I just want to educate you on the reclamation plan and the phasing plan that we'll be implementing, and then we have some product types that we'll be moving towards on a portion of the site. I sent you is it loading? Okay. While he's pulling that up, Thank you. Maybe if you wouldn't mind, just starting the slideshow. So second slide. This is, the last iteration of the site plan you saw, we had a park right here. And we went for an R19 rezone that we didn't fill. You actually didn't vote that evening, but we felt like it wouldn't fit well within kind of what the vision that you had for this area. So we've gone back and we've incorporated it in all of the lots and to make them compliant with the current zoning of R112. So, but the reason why I wanted to show you this map here is, here's the commercial piece that you're voting on this evening. We're happy with the larger, it's been expanded to a 3-acre piece, and it'll be more conducive to a much better commercial site. We've engaged with REMC, they're a third-party environmental engineer group. Lance Hess has been a big part of the contract that we've engaged with REMC on. Lance Hess is your third-party environmental engineer that the city uses. So we've now signed contracts with REMC to provide oversight on all reclamation that's happening here on the site. And the coloring is more or less the lot phasing plan that we're going to be delivering. We're going to start with green, and we're going to start along Del Monte. These homes will be fronting Del Monte. These are in 24 lot takedowns. So we'll kind of go from the east. Green, red is the second takedown. Yellow is the third takedown, or lot delivery. I said red, I'm sorry, that's orange. Red would be fourth, blue is the fifth, and then the white is the sixth. And then this is the area that we've now decided that we're going to reclaim. You've seen lots on that area, but we're reserving this for the last, just because of the phase 2 environmental, with the captured kind of the shop area and where Sunrock is currently occupying here. And then some material, some historical material that we're still doing investigative work on. We want to take our time here a little bit, but that's more or less the reclamation plan and the phasing plan for the site. And we're glad that we've ended up where we have, and it's oddly familiar to the previous preliminary plat that was approved in 2017, was it? Would you, go ahead.
Quick question for you. The plat that we just saw, does it include lots where the current exhibit is showing retained by GWC?
It does.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. So it shows the 8 lots that I pointed out here, Scott,
Okay.
and then there's 38 lots within this area that we're retaining.
Some future date to be determined.
Yeah, so we have a builder whose product I will show you in the next couple slides. There's 147 lots being delivered to them here. We have 38 lots that we'll be retaining here. We'll likely be taking these to market, more of a custom home opportunity, which we're excited about. We kind of need that because we don't know what the total reclamation depth is going to be here. So we're just reserving that for those custom lots. The next couple slides they're just going to be showing you product type on the 147 lots. This is one of the smaller, 2,400 square feet. You can see that kind of the floor plans there. Every one of these floor plans does have, a third car garage option. There's about 5 different product types, and then they're going to be bringing another 2 or 3. You can go to the next slide.
Are there basements?
I don't believe, some of the floor plans may have basements.
I'm just curious if there's a reason,
Yeah.
there's no groundwater or other issues, Scott, that would preclude it from doing it? Okay.
I mean, in some of the reclamation areas, we're going 20 feet down, right? And then to native and bringing it back up, so.
Pretty big, all the basements.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, but we're pleased with the product type. You know, we think some of these can be larger. You know, it's an average of the R112 lots. Some of them are a little bit bigger than others, but you know, we think that this is it'll be a good feel and a good product type for their overall community. So, just wanted to give you kind of a flavor of what we're targeting for those 147 lots. So, any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing, so we'll go into public hearing. Anyone here to talk about this?
I'm Arlen Alt. I live just to the west of that. And, you know, I've seen this coming for quite a few years, but I would just like to make sure and see that a permanent fence gets put in. I've got a lot of quail that live in some really old trees down there, probably a couple hundred quail. And I just don't want to see people going back and forth between there. And I know I've talked to Jared too, and I think we're trying to get something worked out on it, but I'd like to see a permanent fence go in there.
Thank you.
Mike, show his property again.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go out of public hearing. Does the applicant or the city want to talk about the fence potential?
One of the conditions is a fencing plan. We talked about specific fencing on Main Street and then some uniform type of fencing for the remainder.
Are you addressing the commercial and residential, how they abut each other along the frontage with the fence? Isn't our standard a masonry wall when that happens?
It is.
Are we
So
going to
we're-
require that of this developer or of the future commercial user? Go ahead.
Where's this fence supposed to go?
That's my next question.
Okay. Who builds it? Where does it go? And we're talking about both a wall and a fence.
Yes, we are. My question's
Go to
separate
the
from
site
this
plan.
fence question.
It would be part, this is the commercial.
If
and
you see
light,
anything
right?
differently, or if
There
you
you go.
do,
That's
This
it.
is your
jump
property
in.
right here, right?
yeah, so
Let me
we would
cap our
require
lot,
a
sure.
wall here. And I'm not sure that we've defined who builds that. If this property is
Right there,
vacant,
Dave?
yeah, if this property is vacant, when a house gets built there, I don't think we require people that develop single-family homes next to commercial sites to build a wall. So that would come in with the development of the commercial site, I believe. That wall there, and this is the only. Could be, which is how I would answer questions about other fencing, because this is a master plan development. We often go above and beyond what for us otherwise would be a no fence requirement in a lot of parts of the community. And here we have along what's kind of Main Street frontage, a requirement that oftentimes would be a masonry wall, but in this case, it's not really quite a good fit because this property is elevated well above Main Street, even though UDOT owns adjacent, I think, to a lot of that property over there and so forth. So the idea here is simply to say that, and the thought is to carry it throughout the development, that the applicant would identify a type of fence or a couple of different types of fencing. It's typically how we've done it. Usually it's just part of the CC&Rs that homeowners can use when they install fences. So that they're, for example,
Looking for it right there. Mr. Alt would like the fence right here. Is that what-
and I think that's our idea there as well. I hadn't understood that we were necessarily contemplating requiring fencing. Certainly, I think that's within ultimately the council's purview with this being a master plan development. We were more concerned about at really prominent locations. For example, you'll be able to see that fencing from the Salem-Benjamin interchange and beyond. So maybe having something that's uniform, that can create a much better look. Same kind of thought out here.
One of staff's conditions, this is where this is coming from, one of staff's conditions, it's number 6, that the applicant provides a fencing plan.
Right.
Just so you know where these questions come from.
Yeah, totally. And that's, I guess, my effort to try to further describe what we would expect that plan to show.
So it would be that fencing.
And I gotta ask, if you don't mind, Brandon, have you contemplated particular locations, or have you, Jared, as to where fencing would be required?
So DRC, we talked specifically having a split along Main Street as potentially an option. So the bottom of the cell and the top of the open, allow those views of the river bottoms.
That's listed on the plan. The Main Street one is a split.
Yeah, we recently got a set of plans, I think it was Thursday. So I plugged them into the presentation so you can see the most up-to-date layout, but it's currently under review by staff.
That little
And
black
then-
squiggly there says split fence.
Is that the note, Scott?
Well, I don't know if
Yes.
that one does, but
Yeah.
on like sheet 3C it does.
So then, yeah, so then the other expectation would be is, as described by Director Anderson. So for instance, the Swift Creek, is that, what was it ultimately called?
Kennedy Meadows.
Canyon View Meadows. So if you remember Swift Creek by the Baum property, we had the specific condition that on the north side, they would have uniform fencing, because we have uniform fencing that will come in with the trail along Highway 6. And then because we had all the open space in the girls' home to the north, we wanted to have a uniform fence. I believe there was a note called out for their fencing plan, specifically to what might be accomplished with CCNRs as well, saying, okay, if you're going to do a fence along here, here's the expectation that has to be met. And so we would just want something that identifies type of fence, for instance, here, versus type of fence is here, versus wall that's here. So that way, as the phases move forward on their final plats, we enforce those fencing requirements.
On the CCNRs, is there a time frame that they would have to have those fences put in usually?
That gets
I don't know.
tricky.
I don't think that we have necessarily said, are we expecting the developer to install fencing? Or is this just if a homeowner decides to install a fence, these are the options that they have?
The only places I could see, like River Run and Annie's Acres, they did it by phase, where they came in and installed the exterior fencing. So I would assume it'd be probably similar to this
So you're saying mandated fencing has to get installed?
with phase.
Okay.
But that's open to.
So usually it's with
planning
the
commission.
phase. Yeah, so we approve that as part of final plat approvals, and it gets built phase by phase.
By the developer. Is that correct?
The one that would be required is along Main Street, because it backs UDOT right away, and it's a collector road. There is some separation, so I guess that can be discussed, but this one, and then it's commercial, so I guess that one's not as relevant, but anywhere where it's along collector road, that'd be a developer built, part of the development.
In a lot of ways, it's more relevant because it's commercial abutting residential.
Sorry,
The wall
along
would be.
right
yeah,
here.
Gotcha.
Along, yeah.
Gotcha.
Adjacent to the state road, you might.
We don't want to wall blocking that beautiful gas station that Jared's gonna build for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's no quick quack.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we haven't received a ton of clarity on the fencing. I think we had envisioned it as being submitted with, final plat, and it's something that the homeowners could decide on what fencing they'd like to put up, right? And so I don't know how to govern that, because this won't be within a homeowners association, right? And so if we're talking about CCNRs, I'd like a little direction on, how to enforce that.
Who's going to enforce it?
Yeah, and ultimately who's going to pay for it? It's definitely not something that I had anticipated throughout the whole community. I don't know that we're not opposed to, certain, if it's going to be a mandate here, just because this is a state road, and if there'll be a mandate here, I don't know that we're definitely not opposed to that. I just don't know what the mechanism is to.
But you'd prefer not to have CCNRs, is that correct?
Who's going to impose them and who will enforce them?
Wait, that's not my question. My question is, you'd prefer not to have CCNRs, is that correct?
Well, we don't have an HOA governing the community, and so what is the mechanism to impose?
So if he prefers not to have CCNRs, the best mechanism, in my opinion, to impose some sort of fencing plan is just as Brandon and Dave were talking about earlier, which is as part of the phasing, you could put in the fencing and then it's done as part of the phasing, as opposed to in areas where there are sensitive fence areas versus just having the homeowners do it. If there are areas where we feel like fencing should be similar to each other and have a certain look, then I think we should require the developer to do it as part of their phasing plan, especially when they don't want to have CCNRs and they don't want to have regulations on this in the future. And on the heels of that, I would like to see the commercial and residential, some sort of wall there is what I'd like to see as likely, just because of the difference in use. Because I think it could be a problem if you have the homeowner coming first, and then the commercial user comes in 2 years later, they'll never have a fence there for a long time. So I'd like to see that.
I think we're only talking about the perimeter fencing of the development, not
That's certainly
in the
all the
interior.
staff is talking about, just to be clear.
Right.
On that, yeah.
And
Not
typically
within.
homeowners put in their own backyard fence.
Right.
So I think, my opinion is we should err on that side, because that's the typical, that's my opinion. But
And also on public hearings, we don't need to, but if you're coming up from the Benjamin exit, and like Dave said, and that's what you're gonna see right there, would you?
Come up here to the mic.
So, just appearance-wise, coming up the highway there, looking at all the residential houses in their backyard, would it look better to have the same fence across or mismatched fences? Just something to think about.
This is not a tough nut to crack. I butchered it earlier. And I appreciate what both Mike and Brandon have shared with me by way of insight. The idea that when the phase that these lots are in gets approved, we address the fencing, and that's required there just as part of the development of those phases. That's routine, no big deal. I think having the developer install this wall with that phase, we don't approve a lot of residential subdivisions that have a commercial component like this, but I think I still could probably call that routine, not out of the ordinary. And it's also not uncommon when residential uses abut agricultural uses, which is kind of what I would describe what Mr. Alt, I think, described, to require some type of fencing. So just, kind of cracking that nut along there or maybe elsewhere around the perimeter where it makes sense to have some kind of uniform fencing. I think that makes good sense. But other than that, I'd maybe only add that it's not uncommon for master plan developments to identify a particular kind of fence for a homeowner to use if they want to have a fence. Without an HOA, a developer could still provide CCNRs that would describe some different things like that. I would guess that it's Century Homes, right? That they probably have some models that way, documentation-wise, that it'd be pretty easy to use. All in all, I'm gonna try to downplay it. Not a big deal, except that we do want to get the perimeter stuff right, because that can leave a mark that just, I think, we want to avoid.
Dave, question for you. How steep of a drop-off is there back here?
Where you
like
just
down
drew,
to-
I'm not sure that it's steep. I think it's more like through here.
Okay,
Is that
The north part.
so,
particularly right there, right?
Yeah,
Well, some
Austin
part.
Thompson.
so from my perspective, the fence, requiring the developer to do the fence does two things. One, it's fenced right away, which means the people who move in, their kids are less likely to fall down the hill. And two, it looks routine and it looks intentional, looks better. So for me, I think the fence on the steep side is important for me.
Agreed.
Do we have to add a different condition for that, or does that take place in the fencing plan?
I think,
I've appreciated
Sorry.
the conversation. I think it's given us some insight as to what we're thinking and what maybe we have to work through as we go to the next step. I'm comfortable with it just saying a fencing plan, and we iron out the details, unless you guys have, if you have any specific things that you want us to make sure we get, tell us, and we'll make sure we get that in there.
I just did, for me.
Yeah, I
And I
agree.
think that syncs up with
I agree.
so that's not,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not.
And the commercial
Number 6
residential
condition.
boundary.
So,
I'm comfortable with staff in the areas that staff sees fit to add that.
Yeah. And the number 6 condition is that the applicant provides a fencing plan. So,
Any other discussion items? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we recommend the Arrowhead subdivision preliminary plat and zone change based on staff's findings and subject to the following to the conditions.
Recommend for approval?
I think it's, yeah, recommend for approval.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Do we have other business or are we adjourning?
other business.
All right.
it better be good.
Buckle up.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan, Scott. Good to have you.
Thanks, guys.
Is this 5-minute other
You
business?
gonna take us up on having an office
Great
here?
job.
2-hour other business? Okay.
I'll just sit next to Mike. Hey, just have one concept plan that we'd like to run by you guys. This is State Road 51.
Oh, I gotta sit down for this one again. Do I have to sit down for this one again, Dave?
Yes, hot seat.
Okay.
What?
Yeah. State Road 51.
Someone's gotta
You can
develop
discuss.
Spanish Fork. Might as well be me.
We're not making any decisions.
Oh,
so you can sit
oh,
there.
I'm like, you have to sit down? You just stood up.
Can you go to the interactive site for a second?
Allard.
Old Springville Highway. Nope. No problem. Intermarries here.
Did you just say Red Devil Highway?
Slowly.
Okay,
zoom out
Brandon.
Slowly.
They are
Does somebody need to
devils.
be excused?
What?
I
Do we
recuse
need to
myself.
excuse somebody?
Brandon, maybe.
I didn't order cookies.
One more outburst like that. Just one more.
That's strike one.
So,
That's one.
the subject property is right here. This is Lowe's.
Okay.
This is the solar farm. So this is Spanish Fork Parkway. That's what we're hoping to get connected here soon. These will be apartments here. I understand that Mike and Brandon met on the prospect of having some additional office space built along here, which is the plan.
Gas station on the corner,
Yeah.
and then 2 office buildings,
Down.
the existing preschool, and 2
One,
more offices.
two.
What kind of gas station, which brand, you know?
One with good ice.
Holiday.
My opinion is the Chevron. We have no idea. Chevron sounds stupid.
So
We're talking about where?
So it's not.
we're talking about this here with a little finger. Does that help? Okay. This is approved and obviously under construction. I don't know if they've started to go vertical yet. You can see the pad for the first building there. I guess this is probably the first building.
They have material on site. I don't know.
Bunch,
if they're
I've
vertical.
heard.
I hear they're a great outfit too.
Who is it?
Star Builders.
Is it Lone Star Builders?
Yes, sir.
Man, what a messy site.
Remarkably slow. If you remember, this was approved
This will be fun.
well over a year ago.
Yeah.
In fact, this was approved, I don't know how many months before the condominiums that are going up next to the neighborhood Walmart, which they've recently had their last phase approved, probably all be under construction soon, and likely all occupied some 6 months before the first one here is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, I'm exaggerating a little bit.
Put that in the notes.
No, this is a great site for the density and stuff like that. So when Mr. Ernest approached us about the idea of further developing some residential uses here, even though the property owners a few years ago asked us to zone the property commercial, I've really felt that this is an idea that's worth pursuing. I really see limited commercial value off of either the two significant intersections that we have in Spanish Fork along that corridor. So that's part of the proposal. I think that's worth getting your thoughts on tonight, just fundamentally land use.
What you were referring to earlier about you zoned it, but you thought maybe it wasn't a good idea.
No, that's a different one. I'd be happy to talk about that one offline. I might break down as we talk about it, so I prefer not to do that publicly. It's awful. So anyway, question of zoning. In order for their project to work, it would at least have to be zoned R3, maybe even R4. So one of our higher density residential zones. And that being said, one of the other three things that we want to get
Can we look at that a while?
your input on. Yeah, let's go to the site plan.
Is it just this parcel though?
It's
or is it
this
extended?
plus, yeah, there's a finger that extends out that way.
I was trying to fit it in.
Oh, it's
there.
one to
Yeah.
extend the finger out, we'll show you.
So townhomes,
Never good.
pretty straightforward in that
One
respect.
next to it is apartments or?
This
town-
is apartments here. Several
That one we
three,
zoomed in on that was really messy is this one right here, right?
yeah,
Same
exactly.
builder?
That's the pool and clubhouse right there.
Potentially the same builder. This is the
How
pool
does this
clubhouse.
compare to what's across the highway,
It's similar
to the east, about similar?
in terms of density and building type.
And what is going in, kind of on an angle over towards Lowe's, what is similar?
On an angle over towards Lowe's.
Behind Lowe's?
The other angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, go right there.
Also townhomes, yeah.
Similar density though.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, this project's just about.
About built out.
So the layout, love to get your thoughts on that. The idea, the more specific use. And then we also have some building elevations. These are just descriptive of what the buildings might look like. I've expressed concerns over and over about front-loaded townhomes. That is townhomes that have the garage on
They're
the
only 20 feet.
street-facing side, because it's really tough architecturally to do anything with a 30-foot wide building when you've got 22 feet of garage in the middle of that.
Garage doors.
So
And these are front loaders.
these would be front-loaded, so maybe, Mike, I think we have another slide, I hope, of,
Any concern with that long cul-de-sac?
This is what, is there more, Brandon?
And zero parking?
Oh, it's in the presentation. Okay.
so this, driveway, we'd require at least 20 feet. In fact, these days, we're getting more like 22, 24 feet, just based on some of our experience. This would be what you would see predominantly driving through the neighborhood. I appreciate this with the idea that with this space here, there's some life there. And that's what's, I think, most importantly missing from some townhome developments that we have in Spanish Fork. They're certainly common in other communities as well, where that does not exist. Just from there, we have some other elevations and that type of a thing. So quick recap, any particularly concerns you have about just the idea of pursuing a zone change ultimately for the use here? And then any concerns about the layout? Certainly, I think we want to talk about the cul-de-sac. And then design of the actual buildings. If you have any thoughts, our hope is that a little bit of vetting here makes things a lot easier when we get more detailed and evolved plans back in a public hearing on a zone change and so forth.
Does the applicant know how much, like, visitor parking we'd like to see?
They're acutely aware of that.
It doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it.
I'll let them speak to their proposal.
Also, is
Dave, full disclosure, Dave asked me a couple hours before the meeting if I wanted, like, if we just wanted to talk about this casually, and I'm like, yes, let's do it. So this is, for me, this is more high level.
Gotcha.
Just FYI, sorry.
Is the idea of doing a front-loaded, to give more parking space rather than rear-loaded?
I think it's the only way the street can lay out and make it work. We tried it the other way, I'm not sure how to make it work the other way. And so because I don't think the site works for townhomes, and the other way, Dave said, we have to come up with amazing looking garage facing, street facing facades.
I
which
really like that
was
deck
really
above the
surprised
garage.
when I was driving to my brother's house in Vineyard that I saw those, and those are actually off the 11th tee box of Sleepy Ridge Golf Course. And I've never seen garage facing townhomes that look that good. So I took pictures and I got approval from my boss that we would even be willing to build them that nice. And he said, yeah, we would do that if the city likes them. So.
I really like the, what do you call that, a deck above the garage? Yeah, it's
And then it
very
has that
attractive.
eave coming out. I mean, I've never seen them that nice. I've never seen them that nice in Spanish Fork.
And I think that's a nice amenity for the homeowners as well, for a townhouse.
Is the density laid correctly on these?
It's R4 is what we would need.
R4.
That's the map. Yeah, it's not correct, but it's not.
It's not close to 20, but that would be the, I think we're more like, so if it's 5.23 acres and we're showing 75 units. So 75 divided by 5.23.
That's aggressive.
It's 14 units an acre. R3 is 20 units an acre, we're not, it's showing 14 per acre.
That's some of the concerns. This doesn't seem great, user-friendly. Does the staff have concerns with this as far as access, emergency access?
I just saw it for the first time. But I would, and then parking, right? You have the front, but if you happen to have more than 2 people, you're trucking it from here, there's only 6 stalls. And then there's no parking here, right? Because these are all driveways. So you're back to right here, there's 2 or 3 spots. So I think for me, it's parking more for this.
You got 24 feet spanning a 300-foot length, and you get a car here and a car here. Well, you can't. You're blocking driveway where you're at, so you can't do that.
I don't know that I love like the stack right across from each other either. There's like no offset.
Is either property north or south for sale as well? Or is it just these?
That development potential north and south is limited, I think.
To the north there's no development.
There's no development.
In my opinion.
Soils conditions.
We actually have that to the north, we have that under contract, it's about 6 acres, and in the environmental, there's no way.
Is it priced for open space?
Pardon me?
Yes.
So,
Is it priced for open space? No, it's not.
Oh, they want more, they want.
We went to them and said, hey, this is a problem.
We
The only way we can do this is if it's a different price, and they weren't willing to.
We read
All the
calls about storage units in the area.
Yeah.
If that would work.
I don't think that'll pencil, there's trash in that site that has to be removed, the whole thing. It's way too expensive, it's a ton of.
kind of an ugly
And
size.
Joseph, which is yours? Is it these 2 or just that one?
That one.
It's not all 3 of these though.
Todd, it's this and this, this.
Yeah, right. But it doesn't include these 2, right?
Correct, yeah. We thought, a couple things, we think the path of least resistance might be another couple phases of the apartments, but at the same time with it connecting to the apartments and having really nice townhomes, we like the idea of having both products there to offer to even people that are renting the apartments. Maybe they want to get into a townhome and it's right there and all their friends are still there and they're just moving 100 yards away. So we like that idea, and we think with a really high-end townhome product, it would work, which is why if you agree that like generally this townhomes here work, and then you give me feedback on what you'd like to see differently, I'll go to work on it.
Is there any reason, sorry, I was just curious if commercial not penciling because there's not a cross street? Or even if it's like
That's mine.
front facing
Commercial
dentist
not penciling?
office?
Oh, I honestly, like, from a guy who does retail, we don't even seriously look at that for commercial. I'm just being
Oh,
honest.
that's fine. I was just curious if it was traffic, if it was the.
Yeah, traffic counts are not where they need to be. That's not a commercial area, in my opinion. It's not a viable commercial area.
I have a little bit of a concern about green space within the development there. I saw too small, this one that's fairly significant. And then where was the other? Just this little bit here, and a little bit right there, maybe a little bit there. Not a lot for that many units.
Commissioner Mendenhall, you forgot right here, so
Oh,
that's a lot.
And those 5 spots.
If you're
That's
doing,
just because you couldn't fit anything else there.
Strategically lose units and spaces to kind of make it feel more open.
Yeah. I also am concerned about just parking in general. We've talked about parking a lot. Parking's the concern we always have. But I
What would you
also,
like to see on parking?
Could you add parking at the end of that
This would be
cul-de-sac
nice to have
somehow?
This roundabout, have that roundabout move up to here, have a little clubhouse and a green space.
And some parking?
In the far side of the development?
Swimming pool.
It's less accessible over there.
It's less accessible, I'm just thinking, makes that road shorter.
It does, wouldn't you want it more in the central development though? We're gonna do that.
Great, let's do it right here. Let's do it right there.
So, and it looks like each one of these, you have some that have 4, some that have 5, this one has 6. It just depends on what fits. So it'll be similar, it would be similar to what the picture that you had was. Looked like all of those were like 3, nothing
They
that went
vary.
this
I
big.
think if I remember right, they vary as well.
Okay.
John?
honestly, with a development this isn't a huge development. And so to put an amenity down at this end, maybe it makes these people feel like their amenity isn't, I don't know, it's kind of in its little, I don't know, it feels accessible.
I'm hearing maybe
Right next to the
an
junkyard.
amenity,
Something.
more parking. That's what I'm hearing so far. Keep going.
So
Yes.
Joe, this right here doesn't concern, I mean, I'd like it broken up, I like more parking. The townhomes, if your question is, do townhomes in this area cause me anxiety? No.
No.
Not at all.
Would I be opposed changes from C2 to allow for the R3 or R4, whatever is required for something like this? I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Do I like this layout? No, I think it needs some work. But,
Todd, even this section here you don't like?
no. Well, it needs, this I'm closer to liking. I think it needs, like I said before, it needs some more parking. I agree with John, it needs some more green space. It just needs to be, I don't know, it needs to be tweaked a little bit.
broken up a little
But-
bit, in my opinion.
The idea of a zone change to this, I would not be opposed to, for that
No.
space.
And is it right that probably this area is causing the most consternation?
For sure. Because there's very little open space or any other kind of amenity here. These guys are kind of getting shortchanged compared to here. You got quite a bit, as I look.
Unless they love it.
This area too.
Whoever's holding it.
This is for Joseph's benefit, I think, maybe more.
Oh, no.
I want to hear it.
Again, Mike, Brandon, you sit through DRC meetings. I really think that when city manager, Chris Thompson, other people look at the length of that, contemplate some of the things that have already been said, they echo what Todd said, which I'm not sure that the cul-de-sac needs to come back to the midpoint, but getting that thing shortened up, even if that means having buildings on the end, and, I mean, there are different ways to design it than what you have here that kind of exacerbates the idea that this is a problem.
I don't know that it's even a full cross-section required for the cul-de-sac
It's
down
not.
there.
Yeah, so
Point,
there's that.
our narrowest is 27.
But also getting some parking, like Mike said, you're gonna get beat up because of that thing.
But this is really good, because then I can change this now, based on this feedback. So, but the elevations you guys like.
Yeah.
Because one of my next steps is I'm gonna hire an architectural firm to come up with those.
I really wanna say on that, I love the fronts as much as the effort to
Yeah.
make the back different than what we've seen. keeping in mind that they will face onto this, so maybe this is a place for kind of the half wall, half fence kind of a.
Did you see the front? Go to the front
I
picture.
love the front.
The
Yeah,
front
we didn't
is
spend a lot
awesome.
of time on it, but it's a very interesting design. There's a lot going on.
There's the front.
And I think it syncs up pretty well with what you have on the back.
Keep going back a little bit more. There was one, there. It looks a little dark on one side, but maybe that's just the lighting.
The picture I gave to, it actually, if you look on my phone, it actually looks really light, but it's just on his,
It's just
on
how
his
it
computer,
came.
it's coming in.
Oh, yeah.
In the shadow, it's a covered patio.
Yeah, but it's really not that dark. It doesn't look that dark.
I like these.
Yeah.
I like the product a
I really
lot.
like them.
Yeah. The fronts look really nice, but in the way that you've got it designed.
And we
Other
wanted
than
a
along the
two-story.
highway, you're not gonna see the fronts.
Do you
There's
feel
nowhere-
like you're looking at $500,000 homes?
Because that's what they
Because
are.
you are.
It's crazy.
So my biggest concern isn't even on the, if we go back to the interactive map, my biggest concern is the fact that the city
Industrial?
recently gave commitments to the industrial that you guys are important in the long term. And so to me, part of the challenge that you're gonna have is, how do we mesh
Well,
these together?
why did the city give that?
When we looked
What
at
was the concern?
When we looked at the area zone change, where we changed some of the zoning for
Yeah.
different parts of town, this is one where the property owners and the users came out and said, leave us alone, and the city council concurred with that. I don't remember how the planning commission voted.
On this one right here.
I think we voted to leave them alone, and they are left alone.
What's the general plan have of that, though? Industrial as well?
Mixed use. Yeah, we haven't planned for industrial to remain.
Why can't they stay there as long as?
And their concern
they
is with
can.
neighbors right there, residents right next to them, they'll get complaints.
And how does that look and feel long-term?
And we have examples in Spanish Fork of where that has been a problem. I would say, at least so far, it hasn't been a regular issue, but if you think about the towns that Salisbury built down around the alternative high school.
Landmark.
Landmark.
You know, there are some industrial uses that abut those townhomes, and occasionally those folks have complained about noise and different things like that.
I think in those, didn't they pull the
Are
road?
these for sale or for rent, Joseph?
Finished on their property?
I think we're gonna be for rent, but to be determined. I could see us selling.
Or what?
I'm talking about a different area.
It's pretty early. As far as the industrial there, it's kind of nice that they're already there, because anyone who buys a town.
They know.
They know.
they're there.
Right.
But as far as the industrial users being concerned that maybe they're gonna be loud in the middle of the night, I don't know, I don't have much sympathy.
Well, they can't
if they're doing
be.
anything that's outside the code. If-
Yeah.
As long as they're following the code, they're following the code.
Right.
And the industrial was there first.
Exactly. Also.
And in that
from a
case, I'm not
planning
sure.
perspective, I like kind of pushing the new development towards them, because it makes it more likely that someone will come in and give them an offer they can't refuse,
this-
and then that'll get redeveloped.
This one's different, in my
Seriously.
opinion, because
Sure,
it
yeah,
has a
it could-
complete fence around it, and so there's a very definitive separation. Whereas this proposal is, hey, we've got this half street plus 10 that's being proposed.
Oh, that's a great
So
point.
it gives it kind of an
That's a great point.
unfinished.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
so that's
where
your
the-
property line, that's a
That's
half
the
street.
shared access right there. That's the current road.
Joseph, that's an issue you've got to work out.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
What? Say it again.
Well,
Sorry, let me go back there and there, it'll make more sense.
your front door is going to be stuff that nobody's going to be satisfied looking at.
Yeah.
It's right here, right?
Yeah.
So it's that asphalt.
It's that fence, it's that chain link fence.
Is that Ralph the tree? No, I'm just kidding.
Steve the tree.
There's a lot of them.
I think all those trees have
It's
names.
those auto uses back there.
Do you put a
So
fence
you've
on
got-
the?
You've got existing chain link with barbed wire, and then to the north, you've got a.
So what are you
And
saying?
this full road is Joseph's.
Well, it will
They'll
be
be
it's
putting
shared
in-
access, right?
He's proposing to split the road with the neighbor to the south, which oftentimes is a good idea and we would allow, but I don't know that we've ever allowed that where
Commercial
it's two uses that are as distinct as these two are.
Well, so are you saying that the city would require us to develop the entirety of the road?
Quite possibly.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's
I
not-
don't think,
that's not
this is
gonna-
not a
that's
deal
not gonna
breaker, but
work.
I think it's something he needs to.
I thought you were saying we can't have towns by that US street routes.
Well, that's my worst case scenario, which is the timing's not right. Until we have a better definitive direction on what we see happening with the industrial zone property, then maybe the timing's not right. But then on the other end of the spectrum is, yeah, it's right and do what you propose, but then maybe in the middle, it's work out some kind of improvement agreement with the property owner, so we get the fully improved street, and maybe we get a set of steering walls on the far side or something.
Because that's the thing, is it would be nice if they had a wall on this side.
Back side of the curb, is that
Just from a city, just.
accesses with gates?
Because then.
Yeah. So you'd have a back of walk and then a wall, and then you'd have one here, a gated access or something, another access here, and another one here. Right, because each of these properties would have.
And my only concern with doing that level of improvement is we've then solidified that we don't
That's what it's
anticipate
gonna
these
stay.
going
Anywhere.
away anytime soon.
But it wouldn't stop the change. I mean, you're right, it sends a signal. And one other thing to think about is that I'm sure that, I know it is the Hoover shop there, I'm not sure what they do now, but the business right on the corner, these folks certainly have some right to that. And Joseph described one way for them to be able to maintain that right.
The question is, could you just make this the backyard of the townhomes and put a wall right there in your plat, and then it's not so like facing each other.
So kind of face it towards the development to the north.
So right here, you have a wall.
So your townhomes would face north, well, face is
Yeah.
hard, but these rears would be continued around this way, and then your access might be here, maybe one here. Almost treat this like a collector road of sorts, where it's a wall.
Not sure how to do that.
Because then this
Yeah,
property would
take
also
a
look
wall.
like a row.
Because that road's gonna stay there, right?
Right.
Yeah,
The road has to stay there, right?
yeah.
So these guys can come in
They
and
have
out.
to have access
but
down the
can-
road.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that.
Right, but you do a wall on the north side, but then everything on the south side stays open. And then when they develop, the north side's already quote developed, the south side's open. I'm afraid if you put the wall on the south side of the road, it's staying, and it's gonna establish some things maybe we don't wanna establish, like Ryan's saying, but if you put on the north side, you make it part of your development, and the south side's free to do it at once.
So you're saying like a masonry wall or some sort
Yeah.
of wall right
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
same
and
here?
right there,
What are
and
we
then
afraid
right
of
here.
establishing there? You're giving them access, they're able to get in, they want to feel like they're established there, and if it isn't what we want developed, it's a wall. It gets changed real easy. It's not anything more significant than that. As long as they can maintain their access, what other right do they need?
What other what?
What other right, or they should have in it, yeah.
None. And Brandon is trying to avoid solidifying these as the uses that remain forever, which
I
I
think
appreciate, but
I think us developing, someone developing.
That's
it,
the
even if
thing,
it's not
I
us,
think.
Is probably the best way to make their land workable.
Exactly.
I think my thought about it, if you're putting a wall on your side, then your neighbors are gonna find it less obnoxious to be looking at a very different use just across the street. If you're in a super nice townhome, condominium, whatever that is,
Yeah, those
and you
are
walk
great.
out your front door and you're looking at an industrial yard, instead of it being somehow figuring out how to make that be your backyard, and there's a masonry wall in my backyard, and I don't need to look into the,
Yeah, but then he essentially loses that. I mean,
Yeah, you lose your access to your garages along that road if you put a fence
just
all the
would
way
be-
along it.
could you reconfigure it so it's flipped in a different way?
We tried to do that.
See that?
I don't know how to make it work that way, but we did
Yeah.
try that.
It's only 3 units, but
Because then
If
you
you
need
lose those 3
another
units, you
road.
can add some more green space.
Believe it or not, you need another road.
more green space.
And then the whole development's roads.
Right.
Like, the whole thing becomes roads. We tried it that way, it's not.
What would be our minimum improved asphalt there?
27.
And currently it's called out 16. So that's an issue that you.
Okay,
How
parking.
are you merging,
Parking.
how are you merging that north property line?
What? Say that again?
Because I think originally with the ridge line, we had a fence along the south. So would you remove that and open that up where you've got that north
talking here?
walkway? Yep.
We just leave that there, and then this would poke through the stripe.
I think if you're gonna keep a fence, it's gotta be open.
Where, this, right here?
Yeah.
Open, what do you mean by open? You can walk over on it?
I don't think it'd be good to have a vinyl fence, and I think if you had more openings than just the vehicular drive, would make it feel more like it's part of the development, because didn't you say they'd be sharing the clubhouse?
Yeah, I think they would,
Yeah, I think
So
it's a
then I
split
think we
rail
need
or
to
nothing.
do more to.
Like something more decorative, like a wrought iron or something here, is that what
And
you're
put
saying?
some openings.
Yes, put openings through it.
That's a legitimate
Or half.
issue.
Yeah.
Because then these guys can park here. I
That's-
don't know if that's
Because
what
then
you
they can
want.
get,
We
then
don't
they
want
can,
that.
You don't
then
want
they
that.
can get
No.
on the sidewalks and go north to all the major parks and visit friends and all that stuff without having to walk clear down to the clubhouse.
Yeah, but it's not supposed to be another phase of original.
Okay, lest we get too far into the weeds with all of you here, do you guys have other things that you
It's a
want
good cutoff.
him to hear?
It's a solid cutoff point.
We could go on.
I appreciate the feedback. I want
No,
to say thank you.
I think
before
we're
it's-
at the 20 minutes.
I think Joseph has got a good idea of the concerns, and so now,
Yeah.
Joseph, you take it to your guys and have them come up with something that everybody can be happy with.
We appreciate that. That was productive. The only thing I have for tonight, the holiday in July, the 4th, is celebrated on Monday, the 5th, I think. So we're shut down on the 5th. Your meeting would be, is it?
It
The
is
4th is on a
holiday.
Sunday, right?
Yeah, so.
So
Oh, I thought the
Monday, we're
24th.
shut down. Do we have 3 of you that'll be here on the 6th? Wednesday's the 6th.
It will be.
One,
I will be.
I should be.
2, 3, 4. Okay, that's it. I don't think it looks like we have a particularly heavy agenda.
I don't
that night.
remember.
We'll try to get your agenda put together a couple of weeks in advance. We're trying to get to the point to where we have that set, and we can give you guys an idea as to what that agenda looks like. We need to report back on parking. I am hoping to have some things meaningful to share with you in July on that. And if there are any other things that you want us to dive into, let me know. We'll be ready, more ready than we were tonight. This last month has been hectic. But we survived.
I move that we adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Thanks, everybody.